Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage. Today we're working back on the 38 Convertible. Somehow this car has gotten a lot of attention this winter and kind of jumped itself up in line, which is kind of how these things go. But we are digging this car. We're actually seeing a light at the end of the tunnel that we might be able to drive it in its crappy looking state for this summer and continue to customize and perfect it throughout the season, this season for us of driving these cars. So the big stuff we got to start knocking off is just things to actually make it drive as a car. So we got the engine and trans and all that stuff working. We got the radiator in and the fan and the generator and all that stuff hooked up and pretty much working on the car. Now we got to turn our attention to the braking system, the wiring, some of that stuff that is going to need some attention as well. So the brake stuff we've covered a ton in numerous videos. I'm not going to go into depth anymore on these doing brakes on an early Ford. If you want to know about how to do that, watch another video. We're not going to show another one in detail. So Steve's going to work on, in this video, kind of getting the brakes set up. We're not going to show a lot of that. And then the more exciting part of this is we got a bunch of different little odds and ends for this car to make it look a little better. So some stuff I've been hunting for in the background. You guys saw the video where we got the 38 parts car and we went back to the estate where this, one of the properties where this owner owned that this car came from, and we gathered some more parts that we needed for this car, and I bought some stuff too. So we're gonna do a handful of fun little upgrades on it and see if we can get the car looking better and stopping so that we can now start it, drive it out in the driveway, or maybe drive it around the neighborhood, possibly, but we will see. But by the end of this video, we'll hopefully be able to stop the car on its own, and we'll have a few new exterior upgrades on the car. So let's get started.
Yeah, you might have to slide over to the passenger side.
I'm kind of fat these days. The kid was skinny.
Right, he had them big ass feet though, he couldn't even get his feet around the pedals.
Alright, I'm ready.
Off we go. Alright.
All right, so Steve and I got the brakes all set on this car and they are working. Fought us a little bit, but you know, obviously with a dry system, that's gonna take a while. So now that that big project is done and it does have a brake pedal that stops the car, we can turn our attention to some of the fun stuff. So you can see back in the back seat here, I got a bunch of stuff. The trunk is full of just parts for these cars. This is generally what I do when we're working on these cars, or even just storing them in between working on them. We will a lot of times just fill the trunk and the inside of the car with all the stuff. You find a part at an estate or picking, and we just take it and whatever, throw it on. So I throw it in the back. So you can see I got all this trim here. We basically grabbed a big bundle of trim from the estate we found up in the rafters or on a shelf up high in that garage we were digging at last time, and we found a bunch of stuff for 38s and maybe 39 standards. He had pretty much, it seems like he had 38s, 39s, and that was about it as far as the 37 to 39 era goes. But there is like standard, there's deluxe, you know, there's 39 standard mixed in. So got a bunch of stuff in here. You can see we got a bunch of trim. So I need to go through the trim and try and figure out what's what. There's some more kicking around that we got. We got some better or more headlight glass and trim, so we're gonna eventually go through that stuff. But the most important stuff is we got this. I got a couple little Tupperware bins over there that have goodies I scavenged from the parts car. You can see we got some rear window selections now from the past two picks that we've done. I got 2 different rear windows, so I'm gonna go through those eventually. But yeah, so got all that stuff gathered together. I'm gonna go through the trim first and try and mock it up, and then start showing you how to mount that stuff. All right, so been working on mocking up the trim. You can see I just have it taped up. I found the pieces. Steve and I went through and off camera found the pieces that we needed. These little strips that run along the base of the hood were the ones I was really looking for. You could still actually buy this piece from Drake. We found some old originals. I think I even have a nice Drake one from the estate this came from. But what I was worried about is they had filled all the holes on this hood, and I wasn't sure what was going to be left. Luckily, a lot of times you can feel behind the hood or behind where someone has filled the hole, especially back in the day, because a lot of times they use a torch and it's going to be a kind of a glob on the backside. You could find it. So on this bullnose, I was going to start with this because this kind of locates the trim and everything backwards. So this has a bolt or screw that was supposed to be countersunk that went through here and into the front peak of the hood. Now this hood has a peak in it all the way to the bottom, so it's kind of like, wow, how did they do that? Started sanding a little bit. I can quickly see that I think they used some lead in here to fill this, but on the back side I can actually feel, and when I got my light in there, I could actually see that the threaded insert that's like spot welded into the hood is still there, thankfully. So if I can get that area uncovered, it must have been kind of flattened on the original hood. I don't know the other hoods at the warehouse, but it must have had a little bit flattened of a spot here for the screw to go in. As soon as I start sanding this, this is just like 120 grit on my little baby DA sander, it just started eating it away. So I can tell it's lead because it's so soft. So I'm going to keep sanding at this. Hopefully I can locate the hole underneath of this. And the great thing about that is that's the factory location, so that it will center our trim or our bullnose right where it's supposed to be, and we could start kind of finding the holes behind for the other pieces. I can definitely feel something on the backside where the other holes are supposed to be on either side, so hopefully we can expose those, and just a matter of drilling them open if they have a little spot weld or something like that. So start doing some exploratory sanding here and see what we find. All right, so started drilling the holes. A little stressful here, but luckily we still have the parts car stuff kicking around. So the original holes in the hood that Mike has at the warehouse, he sent me a photo, is more like a small rectangular or square hole almost. I think it's a very small rectangular hole that is basically the same size as this. I then went on the rear quarter panels of that 38 outside. It's in our scrap bin. The sections of that still had the original holes. So I basically took a drill index out, found a drill bit that was the correct size, which was it was just under a quarter. I forget what the size is, but it was either a 64th or a 32nd under a quarter. So basically, Mike had sent me a measurement, just a quick picture, and I could see that it was just over a quarter off this bottom lip here is what the hood that he had at the warehouse for the center of the hole. So I basically went and I have this little scribe I use a lot of times that is nice if you need to do, repeat something. So I went up to 5/16, just over a quarter, and I scribed the line, and then I went out and measured, and it's about 5 3/4 inches apart. The holes were on the rear quarter, and it has a curve to it too, so I figured if it works for the rear quarter, it must work for the hood. So I just marked first hole here, which is actually just a little inside of what the original hole was. They welded up here, and it's really hard to drill through the weld, so I just moved it forward just a tiny bit, like a 1/4 inch or so, and drilled my hole there, and then just went back, and you can see I make a mark with a Sharpie where I need it to be, and then I use the scribe to scratch right through the center punch, drill the holes, and I'm working my way down. So I'm gonna I test fit it with 2 or 3 of the clips in, and I like it. It's nice and flush when you use these little clips. Luckily our friend Pete gave us a bunch of his extra NOS clips he had kicking around. So this clip here, when it pops in, they're kind of hard to get out, but when you pry on them right, they actually come out pretty easy. So this clip, maybe I'll use this one here, a little easier to get to. Hard to do with one hand. All right, this clip, when it's turned, how it's in the trim, you can see the edge of the clip is right at the base of the hood, which means the stainless trim is just a tiny bit bigger where it folds over, so it hangs down just a tiny bit. I might actually be hanging the trim just a tiny bit lower than it was originally, but I think it'll help close up this gap where the hood and the hood side is. Every picture I've seen of these cars, there is a pretty decent gap between the hood top and the hood sides, which I was like obsessing over, but you got to remember with having this 3-piece hood and the way it mounts and everything, I think you need larger gaps than what you would a normal setup. So I just cheated it down a tiny bit, but you can see that's how we know we're good, because that trim clip isn't hanging down real far. There isn't a huge gap up above it, so we're pretty good. So I can just run that same measurement all the way across, and I should be able to clip this first piece of side trim on, and it'll hold itself on, and we'll move the other side. All right, so last step for this, for some of the hood upgrades or modifications. So in some spots we're putting stock trim back on. After looking at the car with the hood down, I definitely like the trim on, but this hood emblem here I think is just kind of sticking up in the middle of nothing. And with us getting rid of the standard hood latch setup that was in the hood ornament, it's kind of unnecessary at this point. So I figured we might as well shave or fill the holes that are left by that. So there was a big center hole here where the actual emblem or ornaments rather went in here, and then there is these two holes which were mounting holes. So what the easiest way for me to do this stuff now that I have that that punch over there that we use, which we'll show you in a few, we got the big Rotex punch that works really nice. So we can, rather than trying to fill the oblong or unusual sized holes, like this one is an oblong hole, I found it's easier for me and a cleaner job in the end, and quicker of course, to just fill the holes with, bump the holes up to a common size. I'm not saying that you're filling a hole that started out as a 1/4 inch hole and you open it up to a 1 inch hole. But like these holes here, these two mounting holes, I've already opened this top one up. They were just under 7/16, so they were very, very close to 7/16. So I basically just took a step bit and I opened them up so that it was 7/16 on the step bit. I punched out a little, it's probably hard to catch on the camera, but I punched out a 7/16 hole in a scrap piece of metal, and that produces this little 7/16 inch plug that we can then use to fill this hole. So with a little bit of file work just to get it fitting perfectly, I'm able to just drop this down in here. It sits nice and flush, and we can tack it and just basically fusion weld it in with the TIG welder, nice and hot, and then we can finish it off, and it'll be a nice clean repair there, or filling of the hole. This one here I haven't opened up yet, so it doesn't fit in that hole, so I'll have to open that up. This one is an oblong hole. It is just under an inch at the largest portion of the hole. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and punch a 1 inch hole. I think my punch definitely can do a 1 inch hole. I'm just going to try and do it out of like the 18 gauge that this metal roughly is. I have to measure it. It might be 20 gauge. So I'm going to try and, once I can punch a clean puck out of there, then I'll open this hole up. I just want to make sure. I know these ones are no problem. Sometimes it's not as easy with the large holes, so you don't get as clean of a punch in it, but should be okay. I think I can do it with the thinner sheet metal like that, no problem. Just not if it was 1/8 inch or something. So I'm going to drill out both of the other two holes here, get the pieces fitting. We'll pull the TIG out, weld them all in, and then we'll have the hood modifications or upgrades, as I'm calling them, done. All right, so I got all the hood trim clipped in place, got all those holes drilled. A little bit stressful of a thing to do, but got everything fitting really well. The clips in real nice. Very happy with how all that is. Got the hood shut, and got this, of course, in the last couple of shots, all welded. This was a pain in the butt. When I started welding this here, or I stripped this, it was all mangled, like they had the hood ornament off, and maybe it was filled at another time, or it was just damaged. I don't really know. So it was all wavy and caved in underneath of the hood ornament. And then I stripped it all down, and when I went to weld up the first big plug here, it just popped and carried on, and there was lead I had just missed. It was in the corner. So I started melting lead out, and it went way out into here, went up into there, and then I found all kinds of rough, you can kind of see them in here, rough gouges, and like they had like 20 grit or something, or a big sander, and they went over this thing, and it just was rough as heck. But so I used the planishing hammer after I welded everything up, made the best of it. There's definitely still some little pits in the weld and stuff. Used the slapper and hammer and dolly, and got the shape basically back. Pretty happy with it for now. It's definitely good considering the rest of the car. I'm gonna leave it alone. This hood's got like, there's like a big ass dent here, like a raccoon was doing jumping jacks on it. So that's a problem. We'll address that later. But got the other side piece of trim on, looking good. Next thing is Steve's working on some toe board stuff. He had made them a while ago and didn't get all the threaded inserts in, so he's got them all in, and we're getting interior put back together after doing the brakes. Last couple things. So the skirts, it's been a much argued thing. Some people hate skirts. Most people hate these skirts specifically. I was kind of okay with them, and we were just joking before filming this. I was about to redesign the whole car around these skirts. I don't know why, but it's just how my brain works sometimes. And I was gonna continue that bead into the fender and up front and everything else. And the more I stared at them, they just don't fit very well. They don't have enough shape to them, so you can actually see they're kind of like pulling the shape out of the fender. It's making it like flat where they mount. So just not, I mean, they were good at, you know, aftermarket accessory, but they're just not the best fit for the car. So I just bit the bullet. I was going to make a set of skirts, but honestly, the time it takes, these aftermarket ones that are replicas of the 40 Ford accessory ones, they're actually quite nice. Oh yeah, you can see I put these cool exhaust tips on too. Anyways, I got these, and they're very nice. They're brand new. They have the brackets just like the originals do. And talking to a couple people online, guys that have used them, said they actually fit half decent with a little bit of work. So I got this side fitting. It did take some modifications as expected with aftermarket parts and an old crappy car. So I'm going to modify this one. I'll show you the process. Get this mounted on, get the interior put back together as far as the toe boards and the shifter and stuff goes, and then we're going to pull this sucker outside and see how cool it looks with all these modifications done. And we have brakes now, so I can stop. right, so after fighting a bit, we got the driver's side skirt on. I thought it was going to be simple because I got the other side and it fought a little bit. Driver's side was a whole nother story. So this car, as we've talked about, lived many lives. It's had a lot of abuse, a lot of repairs, a lot of everything. So when we started putting the fender skirt on in the rear, we ended up finding that the fender had the shape kind of taken out of it at the wheel well, and it had some repairs that was locking that in, and just kind of a pain in the butt. So we got it. I kind of roughed it out using my hip, my knee, my arms to get it kind of back to shape. But we're gonna have to pull the fender, and I'm gonna have to use a planishing hammer and dolly and whatever, and get that shape back where it's supposed to be. But for now, we got it. It fits, but I definitely want the skirt to go on a lot easier when the car is done, so that we're not having to have that kind of issue putting it back together. So between the skirts, the trim, all the little changes we did, now we have brakes that work. We're getting very, very close to our first sketchy test drive around the block. We just have to do a couple little more odds and ends to it, make sure nothing's going to fall off the car, taking it 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour around the block. But we're getting really close. But as always, we're going to pull this thing outside and look at how cool it looks outside in the spring warm air and sun, and then pull back in and do some more work. But that's all we have for this one. Drop some comments down below. What do you think of the new setup with the trim in the hood and the new skirts in the rear and all of that? I'd love to hear your opinions, good and bad, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks, guys. Catch you later. On the passenger side?
Yep.